Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another New Jersey International Film Festival Zoom Q&A. Today we have a wonderful documentary filmmaker who's here to present her film at our festival. Stephanie, pronounce your last name for me.
Sure, Stephanie, it's Schwiederek.
Schwiederek, okay, cool. And Katie Scrivani, she was one of the festival jurors and she was involved in selecting Stephanie's film. So welcome to our Zoom Q&A.
Okay.
A little dead air.
So awkward.
That's okay, no problem. We want this to be a little bit raw and funky. That's the way we like to do it. You can see my study is bursting at the seams, and my wife wants me to get one of those pods to put in the backyard, and I refuse to do it because I like to have everything close to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, Stephanie, since we're talking about home, your film is a very, very personal one because you focus on your mom, who's an immigrant from Czechoslovakia, the former Czechoslovakia, correct?
Yeah.
And you talk about your life with her living in a motel. Tell us more about how you got involved in making this project.
Yeah, so I've been documenting my family for like the last, I want to say 7 to 8 years. I started photographing her kind of on and off, starting in 2012 when I went back to college, community college. And from there it kind of blossomed. I started to like kind of look deeply at my childhood and where we grew up, where I grew up. And from there started to kind of pick apart like just the different things that we went through through that time. And then I was happy with where it got in terms of photographic medium, and then went off to grad school completely away from what I'm so used to, and photographing her in that space, and just felt it was incomplete. Once I got to graduate school, I felt like there was something missing, and so each time I would go back to visit, whether during the summer sessions or winter break, I would travel back, here to New Jersey and just kind of collect. I would record her. I would video record her. I was just starting to get into video. I thought it was a new medium opened up to me that would allow more just digging into what I was interested in. And from there, I still felt like I didn't have enough. And then the pandemic hit and I couldn't go back. And so I would then just kind of record our conversations over the phone.
Right.
And then from there, towards like the end of the summer, I started to kind of piece this film together. And yeah, I felt like a weight lifted once it was done. It was like, okay, I feel like this is where it actually needs to be outside of the photographic project I did before.
I mean, was it always intended to be a kind of document for posterity, or is it more something where you wanted it to be a window that you were sharing with the world now?
I think I wanted it to be a little bit of both. I definitely, when I started making and collecting the different pieces of video and audio and stills, for my mom's archive and everything, I did it as a way to like kind of preserve her past and her history as well as ours shared within this space, this site that's now being torn down. But as I was kind of, putting it together and looking at other artists dealing with like really personal history and trauma, in class, I thought there was something just so much more than just my personal experience that I also wanted to try and put out there in a way that was both relatable, but like, I guess also intimate as well. So.
Katie?
So your background is photography, and I like a lot of the camera work that you do because it's a lot of like still, and then you have everybody moving in the background. Was it hard to move from photography to film, or how did you make that transition?
Yeah, it was an interest because when I first, I had to take a video class towards the end of my time at community college, and I hated it. To be completely honest, I was like, "Why am I doing this?" But towards the end of my undergrad, I had to take an additional, like 40 fundamentals, it was called, and it was something about that professor and that class that just changed my way of thinking about the medium. And then as I got into graduate school, and was having advising meetings with different, film new media people, it just slowly became pretty organic of a transition. Um, I know my biggest struggle in transitioning was the audio bit of it, that I like had to really learn the hard way of getting that down. But I think yeah, it was kind of like a fairly, I don't want to say easy because it wasn't an easy transition, but it wasn't difficult either. It felt um, organic. It felt like, okay, this makes sense that I'm going in this direction. And this kind of back and forth pull and push between photo and video made sense to me.
Cool. So this is your first video project then, or first moving image project?
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel that you wanted to include a kind of photographic sense? I mean, it's so interesting because the film itself is very hermetic, right? Because we're in the
Mm-hmm.
space, and you get the sense that you're letting us into your world, and that it must have been difficult kind of sharing your own personal life with everybody else. Is that true, or is that something that you wanted to do?
It's interesting because when I did kind of this similar idea behind photographing my parents and myself and my partner and the motel as just still images, it felt like I still had distance between myself and the viewer.
Yeah.
And then making that transition to moving image where you see us speak and you see the space and you see kind of our interaction, which can be both really tender and also very conflicting. And there were moments where I was like, is this the right thing that I'm doing? But then there were other moments that I felt like it was a very cathartic process and brought me and my mom closer together, which then made me think that this was the right thing to do because it just felt like necessary to talk about all the different varying themes and discussions within the film. So there was like some bumps in the road of like, self-confliction of like, do I do this? Is this the right thing? Because it's so different from photographic stills. But I think after I kind of put my my concerns in the back burner, I felt pretty good about it.
Katie?
So one of the main things in this film requires you to have this certain sense of vulnerability, especially showing it for this our audience. And I guess you don't really get that with photography. Like, well, you might, but is that difficult? Like, to put yourself out there?
I feel like now I don't feel strange in doing it because I've been talking about kind of this story and this narrative and these varying different things of trauma and dysfunction within the family and what does that mean in a broader spectrum for a few years now. So I don't I still get that feeling of vulnerability of like, okay, I'm doing this and like once it's out there, it's out there. But I don't like have a fear for it. I feel like fairly confident in like just putting it out there. Because it's things that we do need to talk about. I feel like myself personally have like repressed so much of this own stuff in my own life that it just became like heavy, and doing these kinds of works I feel it's cathartic for me, but it also opens up the doors to these really difficult discussions that I feel there's taboo to have. Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously the film is, we should tell people where is I mean, you lived in a motel for 13 years, correct?
Mhm.
And where
Correct.
is this motel?
It's in Pine Brook, New Jersey. So right outside of like Motteville Township, like
And
right on Route 46 West.
right, right. And
Yeah.
so the rationale for your mom has to deal with, a lot of issues being an immigrant.
Hmm.
And, you talk about getting a green card and those things, during the Trump era would have been
Yeah.
really very difficult. And I think, now, well, of course, it's hopefully going to change. But prior to that, it was still not that easy, right?
No, and I mean, even in the 90s and early 2000s, when my mom first got here, it was 1990. And since then, it's just been such a difficult um, system to navigate through to get to that point. I think there's a assumption that if you marry a military American soldier, which is who my dad is, he's a veteran, you know, you're okay, you're free, you have everything you need, and that's not the case. Like it's a process, and it's a difficult process to go through because there's just so many different variables that you don't always get the correct information on. And so we're still waiting. Hopefully with the new administration, things become a little bit more streamlined, but
It's still not that easy. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, you talk about the American dream and the description of your film and how it's not something that's relatively easy to attain. And I guess your mom is a perfect example of that. But you, on the other hand, seem to have overcome those limitations. Is that true? I mean, you talk about leaving home and what it means. And was it leaving home the trigger that allowed you to open up and get out of being kind of in a claustrophobic setting, or is that just completely off base?
No, I think physically leaving home, so we lived in the motel and then we moved to a 2-bedroom apartment in Parsippany. And then after that, I left home to go to Rutgers.
Right.
And I think doing that, and I have a wonderful partner who's been an incredible support system. And so, I think leaving home and experiencing life for myself outside of what I'm used to, both with my parents, but also like, the history of my childhood, kind of getting out into the real world, getting a job, having friends, having a partner, and just like having that experience, and allowed me to see more than just like this little small.
Yeah, it was liberating. Yeah.
Right.
But so your film to me is like a moving selfie in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And but I'm trying to get a sense of, you started filming 7-8 years ago, you said, correct? But is that not true? Or
No, so my photographic work was done about 7-8 years ago. I only started video probably 2 years ago.
I got you. And so you knew you started the project, but when did it kind of coalesce for you? In other words, when did everything start to fall into place and you started to realize the footage that you had would be cohesive enough to make it into a documentary?
Yeah, definitely. So the summer of the pandemic, I had a lot of free time on my hands. I had just graduated from SAIC, and I just sat there with all the video I took over like the 2 summers and the 1 winter break when I traveled back home, and just sat there and kind of went through everything and started to make notes. Okay, like what is in this video that makes sense and what matters, and like just started kind of slowly piecing things together. And it took like, I want to say like 5 months to put things together where it actually made like a cohesive sequence. It didn't feel too disconnected. from anything else. It felt like it had a good flow. But yeah, it just took me sitting down and kind of making a list of like each video and what each video contained and like why does it make sense for me, recurring themes that were happening in each kind of separate video clip, and then slowly piece them together.
Yeah, that's what I tell my students. The editing process is where the film is actually made, right? And you
Yeah.
look at you get to like live in the, and then you dream about the images that you see, you know.
Yeah.
So wait, you went to graduate school at the Art Institute, right, in Chicago?
Yeah.
And so, because I wanted people to know, because I think that's a wonderful school that
That's
has a really tremendous reputation for turning out wonderful experimental filmmakers as well as documentary filmmakers. So
yeah, it was a fantastic experience to work with some of the advisors within that department that taught me so much about the editing process. So
yeah. Katie, go ahead. We have time for a couple more questions.
So what's next? Are you going to make another film? Are you?
I really want to. I mean, I've kind of been playing with a couple of like little short videos, kind of thinking, I've been really inspired lately in regards to performance and Marina Abramovic's work. So I'd like to kind of see what happens there. But in terms of like another documentary film, I would love to travel back to my mom's homeland. She still has family there. And I'd love to kind of do a deeper dive into the background of her parents. So they were both alive, during World War II and this kind of transition within the Cold War and Stalin. And so it would be, I think, such an interesting work to kind of like do a deeper dig into her history, and kind of just understand more about like the Eastern European culture, because it's so rich. There's so much there, and it's so interesting to see how so much can just kind of repeat itself, 50, 60, 70 years.
My wife's parents were Ukrainian emigres, and I know very well the horror stories that took place during World War II, and even prior to that, when Stalin, initiated this famine in Ukraine, where millions of people lost their lives for no real good reason. And
Right.
so I think you'll find a lot, because Czechoslovakia also was in the same situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to tell people how to get tickets, so I'm going to share screen for 1 second. And so this is how folks normally get to us. They go to njfilmfest.com, and normally everything would be here, but because our film festival is going to be virtual this June, the festival runs from June 4th to June 13th, and Stephanie's film, Leave Nothing Behind, is going to be playing on opening weekend, which is Sunday, June 6th. And you'll be able to watch her movie video on demand over the course of 24 hours. So, you want to watch the movie on June 6th, starting at 12 midnight, you can. And you have 24 hours to finish watching the film once you start. Or let's say you're a late nighter and you want to watch it at 11:45 in the evening. I think that's the latest you can watch it. You still have 24 hours to finish watching the movie, which is about an hour. But the way that you can get information, buy tickets and stuff, you would go to our homepage, and then you would click over here on the left-hand side underneath home, where it says New Jersey International Film Festival schedule. You click on that. And because we are a virtual festival, normally everything would be here if we were live, and you would scroll down and you would see all the movies that we're showing. But we're working with Eventive. So you click on this red link, which now bounces you to our catalog page, which shows you all the movies that we are showing. And you would click on Leave Nothing Behind, which is playing with 2 short films, The House on Carter Road and Safe. Both movies deal with home. So there is a connection, although the 2 short films are fiction, and Stephanie's movie is a documentary. So you get all the information about her film. You want to buy tickets, you click on pre-order now, and all the movies that we are screening are $12 per program, and that usually means a couple of shorts and a feature. And you have that video on demand feature. Plus, we will provide you with links to Q&As like this one and intros, where you can watch all of them, and we provide those to you at no charge. So you want to watch everything that we offer, there's a festival pass that's $75. That's a really great deal where it's like half price for watching everything. So it's like $6 a program. So I want to say thank you so much to Stephanie for joining us today. And thank you for Katie for doing, and this is number 3, I think, right? Q&A that you were part of. Thank you so much. Katie was one of the judges and she watched hundreds of movies. We got 547 films from around the world, and we're only showing 25. So the creme de la creme includes Leave Nothing Behind. So thanks so much, everyone, and hope you be able to join us at the virtual screenings. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.
Oh, that's not what I wanted to.